I know too.
President Biden picks a fight with Republicans. Ohio Republicans pick fights with themselves. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. President Biden says the state of our nation is strong, and he tried to convince the American people he remains a strong leader. In his State of the Union address, Biden pointed to a pair of Ohio projects, the planned Intel factory in New Albany and the planned fix to the Brent Spence Bridge in Cincinnati, as evidence of his success. The president also took the fight to hardline Republicans who demand deep budget cuts in return for lifting the debt ceiling.
All of you at home should know what those plans are. Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority. Let me give you, anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I'll give you a copy. I'll give you a copy of the proposal. That means Congress doesn't vote. Well, I'm glad to see you. No, I tell you, I enjoy conversion.
Sam Gresham, it seemed like the president may have set him up there.
He did set him up.
Well, the question is, before this, is he too old to run for re-election? Did he help convince folks that he's not in that speech?
I don't think so. The old dog has showed a lot of people new tricks. And since I'm close to his age, I'm much more sensitive to him. The only thing I'd worry about is the energy. Plus, you have a real political conundrum. If he doesn't run, will the Democrats support Kamala Harris? Or will there be somebody on the outside come in? But with this event at the State of the Union, I think he illustrated how undisciplined, how incompetent, how unstrategic and tactical the Republicans are. They fell right into his trap.
Mike, do you agree? It's a small number of Republicans who were doing the most of the jeering. The speaker was trying to shush them throughout the whole speech. What do you think?
Very small number, which I thought operated very poorly. But then again, these State of the Unions, I agree with some members of the Supreme Court, says they are nothing more than political pep rallies. And that's what they are. And I don't mean Biden. I mean Obama, I mean Reagan, I mean Bush. That's all they are. They get up here, I'm the greatest, I'm doing this, send me back. You guys are terrible. You know, I just think it's exactly what it is. It's a political pep rally. So I said that doesn't excuse the Republicans, the crazy ones, that they are some crazy ones, yelling and screaming. You know, Mike, you've heard me say in all the years I've done here, this is one thing Democrats do every single election. Republicans are stealing Social Security. It'll never fail. It'll never fail. My whole life that's happened. So he throws that out, and, you know, it's just, as I say, I pay no attention to any of them.
Yeah, now what he was talking about is some Republicans want all federal laws to sunset, to basically expire after 5 years, and you have to renew them after 5 years. Now, you could say Social Security, Medicare sunsets, we're not going to fund it anymore, but chances are they would fund them, but that's what he was saying.
Yeah, and I think what you see from Democrats lately is really trying to paint Republicans as extreme on certain issues, especially when you look at Medicare and Social Security. These are issues that poll well across the board, and I think that's sort of the strategy, kind of going back to when Tim Ryan ran for Senate in Ohio. That seemed to be one of the messages that did carry on, even though he didn't win. And I think the other thing that was pretty interesting with President Biden is that it looked like he and his staff knew he was going to be stepping into hostile territory. Right. And so it wasn't that buttoned up speech that you usually see. He leaned in and kind of had a conversation, a kind of a comfortable conversation with people in the audience and everything. And that seemed like an interesting strategy to go with.
So should he run again, Sam?
Yeah.
You think he should?
I think he should run. But again, we have this conundrum.
Yeah.
What does an 80-year-old president do? And Kamala Harris? Or do you bring somebody else off the bench? If he takes Kamala out of the picture, the black community is gone. And I don't think he wants to do that.
If he were to replace her with another African American?
Well, now...
Cory Booker or...
We would still be hostile because she's a black female. And I don't even think replacing her with another black female will make people happy. She's the first one. They've been dogging her, if you've been keeping up.
Yeah.
They've been dogging her in Washington, so I don't know if that's going to happen.
Is Joe Biden the best candidate, Mike, to take on Donald Trump? Should he get the
Oh,
nomination?
God, I hope that's not the option. But anybody but Trump, in my opinion. But Biden, I think, whether he should or not, I think he's going to run. And I disagree with Sam, this black thing. If he doesn't pick Kamala Harris, you mean the Democrats, the black Democrats are all going to run out and vote Republican? I think it's an absurdity.
Stay home.
They stay home.
Well,
And I will tell you, black women specifically will stay home. And particularly in the first primary in South Carolina, your president, our president, may be in trouble. There is an emotion tied up in a black woman vice president in the black community, whether it's males or female. So it's a hot issue.
Well, I agree with you on South Carolina. I mean, Biden wouldn't be in office today if it wasn't for South Carolina. And he owes that to the black leadership down there. That's
Right.
true. So South Carolina, I agree, that would be a major problem. But I don't think any of that's going to happen. I think Biden is going to run. Harris is going to stay. And hopefully it's somebody besides Donald Trump.
All right, we shall see. Here in Columbus, Republicans in the House continue to fight with each other. Now it's over who controls the privately raised funds that help Republican members win and retain their seats. It can total millions of dollars in an election year. Usually the Speaker, the head of the party, controls the account, but supporters of jilted would-be Speaker Derek Merrin say they control the funds because they have the support of most Republicans in the House. Now they are threatening to take the matter to court. Meanwhile, a month into the session, not one piece of legislation has been filed in the House. And this is usually very simple, as it always is. The Speaker leads the party, his or her party. He controls or she controls the funds, but not this time.
Yeah, and everybody on Speaker Stevens' side says, well, the Speaker controls the funds. Well, the Speaker became Speaker because every Democrat voted for him and 22 Republicans voted for him. Meanwhile, you have this other leader within the Republican caucus who has the majority, about 2/3 of the majority of the vote within the Republican caucus. So who controls this big pot of money? We're sort of seeing the strategy from Derek Merrin right now, the person who ended up losing to Stevens in the Speaker race, where he's saying, sure, Jason Stevens, he's the Speaker, not putting up a fight against that. But they believe that Merrin and his supporters should control the money. He does have the majority of the caucus behind him.
Mike, there's nothing in state law that says that the caucus can't figure out for themselves who runs this money.
Well, I think that's true, but my guess is the losing side on that, unless there's some compromise, which seems too reasonable to expect there will be, it probably will go to the court, and then the judges will decide, who has it. It's very embarrassing to me for Republicans to continue this type of thing. The Washington situation with the Speaker was bad enough. This is pretty much unparalleled, and
Looking down the road, Andy, when they go to raise money 2 years from now, using this fund, this account, I'm guessing it's easier to raise money from donors if it's the Speaker who is in charge of the account, because he will control legislation. He will be able to raise money from folks who support his legislative agenda much more easily than one single member of the House. Yeah, he's the head of the caucus, but he can't control what gets on the floor if he's not Speaker.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point because there's kind of two facets to this. There's raising the money and then deciding who gets the money. And so on one end, Jason Stevens, as somebody who's leading the policy, who's driving the agenda, might be able to be in a better position to fundraise. But then who's going to get that money? Is it going to be his supporters over the people who didn't support him? And that's where the infighting happens again. We have this whole trial going on in Cincinnati right now that has to deal in part with who got that money back then, too.
Sam, Democrats helped put Jason Stevens in the Speaker's chair. Any chance he gives some of that money to Democrats?
I doubt that, but I thought it was a shrewd move. I really thought it was a shrewd move. And I talked to some of my Republican friends, Terry Casey in particular, and I asked him who's the Speaker of the House, and he got confluffered and all that. I thought it was a smooth move. Now, I'm going to tell you, there's one that's going to happen in the House. That somebody's going to call for vacation of the seat of the Speaker. And it doesn't have to be a Republican. It can be a Democrat who can call for that. Boy, you're talking about a zoo if they do that.
And that gives the Democrats some leverage, whatever agreement, if any, Jason Stephens, made with them. Mike, I'm surprised this hasn't been resolved. Just get in the room and work it out. Why hasn't it been resolved?
Well, Mike, it's inexplicable to me. I mean, these things happen from time to time. I'm talking about inter-party fights, and we all know that, regardless of which party. But rarely does it get to some extreme that I think we have here. I would just think if you had one person representing each side here, or two or three, and you sit down over a period of a day or two or a week or whatever, you can structure something that would be acceptable to both sides. But apparently, they've got their heels dug in, and it's not going to happen.
Andy, could anyone play peacemaker? Could Governor DeWine be the peacemaker? Senate President Huffman say, I know they don't want to cross branches of government, but
I think at this point, what we're hearing from those leaders that you mentioned and others who could maybe jump in, it seems like kind of a toxic territory right now where they think that they could do more harm than good at this point. I think they do want to see if things resolve themselves. We are seeing some of the Marin people sort of jump the fence and go over to the Stephens side. And so I think maybe there are some within the caucus who believe there's just going to be a natural shift over for Stephens. But like you said, no legislation has passed right now. There's nothing going on right now.
Both of y'all are being really nice. Okay, some of these people have no integrity whatsoever. I think it's about the quality of the people. You know, I'm not a arrow thrower. I'd rather go in the room, have a conversation, and agree where we're at. These guys like performance. They like being out in front, booing, screaming at people. You don't get anything done like that. You really don't. And I think they come from a world where this stuff is really valued. It is like passing a piece of legislation when you holler at the President of the United States. Wow, where are we at?
I do think that there is a sense of personal betrayal there, too, and I think that's fueling some of it, too.
Okay. The week 3 of the Larry Householder trial gave defense attorneys a chance to question the FBI agent who has laid out the bribery case against the former speaker and the lobbyist. Jurors have heard secret recordings, read text messages. They all show the behind-the-scenes efforts to get Householder elected speaker, pass the nuclear bailout law, and then stop efforts to repeal it. Mike Miller, former prosecutor, also have served as a defense attorney, been around the federal courts. How are you viewing this trial 3 weeks in?
Well, it's a very complex trial, Mike, and I don't claim to have all the details that the people who are participating in it do. I think that something that I think is really going to hurt Householder is similar to the murder trial going on in South Carolina when they're bringing in this evidence about this guy's other problems. If they can, as they've indicated they can, trace that money, some of it, to Householder fixing his house, paying all of his credit cards, settling deals on suits, legal suits, that is really damning. Now, whether it has anything to do really directly or controls whether it's guilty or not guilty of the charge, I don't know. I'm not an expert in that field. But this attack, if they can prove that, I think it hurts him very, very badly.
Andy, you've been in the courtroom this week. It's going to be a 6 or 8 week trial. It was 1 day delay because of a COVID case. This comes down to one side says this is just really hardball politics. The other side says this crossed the line into bribery.
There are millions of documents of evidence that exist and they've been poring over, but the prosecution's trying to answer one question. They're trying to make the argument that Householder passed HB 6 as an agreement because of the money he received from First Energy. I think what we're going to hear from the defense lawyers, part of what we already did hear in their opening statements, is that this is politics as usual, that 501c4s are not a bad thing. They are legal to be used, but was there an agreement? And so there are a couple of different points to be made in the prosecution's argument. One is this trip to DC where First Energy executives met with Larry Householder, and then a few days later, Generation Now, that dark money group, was created. So there's a lot of dots to be connected, and we're seeing that happen over the course of this trial.
Sam, the folks who have pled guilty have not testified yet. We expect them to. They could be the key witnesses in this. But how, as you read this, do you see reasonable doubt that this is just hardball politics?
No, from the standpoint of common cause, this is play to pay to play, whatever it is. And it's a part of what we call a culture, but it's corrupting. It causes problems for people when you do that. I think sometimes people say politicians are all like that. Not all politicians are not like that. Not all politicians pocket millions of dollars to do something. Most politicians, do something because they think it's the right thing to do, whether I philosophically agree with them or disagree with them. That's why they're there.
What's going to be interesting, though, is they have 14 jurors to have to convince that to, because people who are around the State House and around Capitol Square might know the difference between a little bit of politics and then what's happening here, but those jurors are the ones that they need to convince.
What should we look for in the next couple of weeks, Andy?
Big-time witnesses coming from householders, former team, co-defendants who have accepted plea deals, and even undercover agents may be taking the stand to talk more about things.
They flip these people?
Yeah,
They're
some-
cooperating, yeah. All right, abortion rights could be on the fall ballot. Two groups exploring ballot initiatives to guarantee abortion rights in Ohio say they are collaborating. Physicians for Reproductive Rights and Protect Choice Ohio tell the Columbus Dispatch they plan to file ballot language in the hopes of putting an amendment on the November ballot. They would have to gather nearly 500,000 signatures to meet that goal. Sam Gresham, you're with Common Cause. You all are working possibly on an amendment for redistricting to put on the ballot. Is your group, in these groups, are you racing to the ballot in November for fear the legislature could make it more difficult to pass one of these questions?
Yes, we are. And we're also working together to get the signatures. It's an interesting posture. I told Mike Gonkadakis,
Gonkadakis,
the worst thing that his side of the street could do was get rid of Roe. And it has turned out to be, I'm right, because I don't think Roe is over. I think we're going to ride Roe for the next 10 years. And every time somebody goes to the ballot, Roe is going to be there. Now, whether they get the signatures, I think that's fait accompli. I think it's going to happen, just in the energy of how women have reacted to Roe in Ohio.
Well, we're in 23, which is generally a municipal election, rather than 24, which is a presidential election year, when turnout is huge. Is it stand of a better chance passing in 23 or 24?
I don't understand their strategy. My preference would be go to 24. I would be a down ballot issue, but I'd have more people coming out to vote for that issue. And in our particular case, redistricting, we have pluralities of 70% twice, but now we had no opposition. But we got 70% of the people in Ohio to support us, we believe. And also all 88 counties, our ballot passed. We believe 24 is the year for us.
But Andy, it is the prospects of needing 60% to get one of these passed by voters that might prompt these groups to go on this November.
Yeah, there are a couple of factors playing into the sense of urgency. One is raising the threshold to 60%. The other is that this abortion ban is currently on hold, and this group says they say it would be unconscionable to wait until 2024 because if the ban were to go back into play, then it would just cause all sorts of problems again. The other thing to think about with 2024, with the presidential race, with the U.S. Senate race, is that it would be a lot more expensive to run ads for your campaign going into the general election.
Mike, this all comes down to how the amendment is worded. Is it a complete, total abortion rights, no restrictions at all? Is it the Roe standard of viability? Is it 15 weeks? Is it 12 weeks? That's really what it's going to come down to.
Well, by the way, what Andy and Sam have said about this, I agree with totally, but that's going to be the answer, what it says. If it comes back to be, totally zero, abortions are totally outlined, or abortions anytime you want it, I think they both fail, big time. And the question is, what is it going to be? Is it going to be 6 weeks? Going to be 12 weeks? It just depends. I think, though, Sam is right. It will be on the ballot this November. And he's probably also right, as is Andy, that it would be better off for them if they waited until December. But I understand why the people don't want to do that. So I think it'll be on in November, and we'll see how it's drawn.
Andy, where is that 60% resolution? If they didn't meet the deadline to get it on the May ballot this year, now it could possibly be in November. That could be on the ballot as well, maybe.
And it kind of goes back to that speakership rift that we were talking about earlier. That was an issue that they thought they were going to move quickly on in January, and it never came to the floor. And so there was a question whether Speaker Stevens wasn't going to bring it to the floor because of some deal that was made with Democrats. We don't know. But now he is talking about the potential for bringing it back up again and putting that on the ballot in November.
Isn't there a threshold that like that would affect their possibilities too
Yeah.
on
Well,
capital improvement activities, would you have to get a 60%?
for bond issues and everything,
Yes.
there's a fear that it would also impact that too.
Well, that's why the latest plan was if the legislature puts the amendment on the ballot, they only need 50%. But if the voters put the plan on the ballot through signature collection, it would need 60%.
That's discrimination.
Well, that's because of the bond issues. They don't think they can get 60 for the bond issues.
Right.
It would be a hard sell to
Yeah.
voters. Let's put it that way. Anyway, the head of the Ohio National Guard and deputies at East Palestine, Ohio, face questions after the arrest of a reporter covering a Governor DeWine news conference. News Nation's Evan Lambert was reporting live in the back of the gym where the governor was briefing the media on the train derailment and chemical leak. Police and National Guard General John Harris ordered him to stop and then confronted him. Authorities told him to leave the gym, so the reporter stood his ground, and then that led deputies to arrest him.
Or you were going to jail.
Do not touch me.
Sir, can we talk outside,
I
please?
am trying to
Can we talk
listen.
outside, please?
And he escalated with me. I am doing my job. This is covered by the First Amendment.
Excuse me, sir. I'm the building supervisor here. Please leave.
There you have it. You're going to stand right here.
You're going to stand outside.
You are from the
Or you're going to jail. Come on, let's go. Let's go. Come on, out. Out. Out the door. Out the door. Yeah, you're under arrest.
The reporter spent several hours in jail before being released. The Columbiana County Court document says Lambert was charged with resisting arrest. News organizations have condemned the arrest. Governor DeWine later said the reporter had a right to be there and the charges should go away. Andy Chow, it is not uncommon for reporters to do live shots during live events. You do it in the back. I've done it. You have to use your golf voice sometimes to be quiet, but it's not unusual. It just seems like these folks perhaps overreacted to that.
Yeah, I think what happened is a shame and an embarrassment. And yes, I think maybe if you're from a small town, you're not used to seeing reporters do live shots. What we heard from Governor DeWine is he's used to that happening. Yeah, reporters have to go on and do their live shots. Is it maybe rude? Is it maybe annoying? Yeah. Is it an arrestable offense? No. And I think it's just kind of ridiculous that it escalated to that situation. Now, we don't know everything. I haven't seen everything that happened. And I do think it's also interesting. I've been able to talk to Major General Harris several times. He seems like this seems out of character for him to be playing the role that it sounds like he played in this situation.
We don't want to talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room, do we? It's a black man. You are in a small community. He's a reporter. They didn't like what he said, so they're going to arrest him. He's supposed to be humble and shut up and walk away, and it didn't happen. So no, the 800-pound gorilla that it changed the calculation was this is a black man.
And I'll say, like, when I'm reporting on things, sometimes I'm the biggest reporter in the room, sometimes I'm the tallest reporter in the room, sometimes I'm the only person of color in the room, and I get more attention, I get more security sometimes, and I think it's a shame that it happens.
Is this, as Andy mentioned, that East Palestine, Ohio doesn't get a lot of media attention. They got some here, unfortunately. Hopefully everyone's okay after that terrible accident. That the deputies just didn't know, or is there some inherent animosity towards the media? Perhaps race figured in there.
Oh, I don't know. I don't live there. My wife did in that county, but but I've been there many times. I have no idea what it is. I hopefully it's neither one of those things. I would think there's much more media prejudice than there is a black prejudice, would be my judgment. But I would say this, I think when all's said and done, those charges will go away. I don't think any prosecutor is going to bring it. Just looking at the film, to say that's resisting arrest is a real stretch.
Yeah,
A real stretch. But I just think it'll end up going away.
I think there's an atmosphere that pervades all over this country right now, that racial issues, whether on a large scale or a small scale, in a sense of confrontation, people overreact. There's always tension when people of color come into a room with white people, and there are large numbers of people of color coming in that room. There's tension. I don't know why I do. Some of it is guilt, some of it is fear, some of it is ignorance. But at this time, there's a lot of tension flying around. Traffic cars, stops. I hear my friends say they get more pushback from white people in a gas station fighting over a pump, when a few years ago, hey, that didn't mean nothing.
Yeah, it's all part of the increased tension and divisiveness in the country. Anyway, our off-the-record parting shots. We end the show with those, and Mike Miller up first.
Well, I just think the next few months, 6 months or so, are going to be very interesting, seeing the Republicans jockeying to see who's going to run against Sherrod Brown in the 2024 Senate race. There's one or two have already announced their.
Matt Dolan is announced on the Republican side.
Matt Dolan, right, announced their candidacy, but there will be more, and it'll be a very, very interesting race.
All right, Sam.
I think the most important thing that will happen this weekend is that Kansas City will beat Philadelphia. Go Chiefs.
So you're rooting for Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I'm going with Patrick, man.
All righty. Andy.
Just want to give a shout out to all the journalists who are in Cincinnati covering the Larry Householder, Matt Borges trial. They're there every day working many hours to make sure that we all know what's going on. And unfortunately, there are no cameras allowed, there are no recordings allowed, so we're really depending on those reporters to give us the information.
I haven't seen any cartoons. Is anyone doing the artist renderings down
I'll
there?
put out some of my drawings at
those
some
are
point.
great. If you haven't seen those on Twitter, Andy does a wonderful job of portraying federal court in stick figures. My off-the-record comment is our thoughts, of course, are with the earthquake victims in Turkey and in Syria and the Turkish American Association of Ohio. Their headquarters are up on 161 in Linworth. They are trying to raise money for their fellow countrymen, and they have a bake sale on Sunday up there on 161 in Linworth all day on Sunday, so keep that in mind. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Continue the conversation on Facebook, and you can watch us anytime at our website, wosu.org/COTR, or through the PBS video app. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.